watching Shalom TV, celebrating Jewish culture.
Hello, I'm Mark Golub, and of the many issues which the Jewish community grapples with, one of the ongoing issues of special concern is the way in which the Jewish tradition and the Jewish community treats women, especially with respect to their role in synagogue life and Jewish ritual. One of the ways in which the modern movements of Judaism, Orthodox, Conservative, Reform, Reconstructionist, differ has to do with the way they address women and do or do not include women in the ritual life of the Jewish community. And one of the areas of Jewish life where issues regarding women is most pronounced has to do with prayer. Obviously, the traditional Jewish prayer book reflects a masculine language as well as a different approach to men and women. In traditional Judaism, for example, a woman is not required to pray 3 times a day as men are, since the Jewish tradition sees women as having more important responsibilities of taking care of home and family. And because women are not required to pray 3 times a day, as men are, the Jewish tradition does not view women as being able to fulfill the responsibility of leading a congregation in prayer, since a Jew is not able to help another person fulfill a mitzvah, a commandment, if that individual Jew is not responsible for the commandment, him or herself. It is in this context that I have the pleasure of introducing you to a very special individual who's edited a Jewish woman's prayer book. Aliza Lavie, who teaches political science at Bar Ilan University in Israel and also works in the field of Israeli television. And Dr. Aliza Lavie, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks to you.
There is so much I want to talk to you about. First of all, I want to talk to you about your book, just as a book, qua book. You know, we should tell people, first of all, this is not a siddur. This is not a prayer book in the traditional sense of what people think of. Aliza has not created a woman's siddur. It is a very sweet book. I hope that word pleases you. I find this a very sweet, loving, lovely book.
It's touchy.
It is touching.
Men,
exactly right.
Women,
right.
You know, Orthodox, Conservative, like you said, and secular people that
That's right.
can't touch the siddur, especially in Israel.
Yeah, especially in Israel?
In Israel, yeah.
Why especially in Israel?
Because here in the States or out of Israel, you feel that, you know, you want the Judaism will be part of your life, because otherwise, sometimes you can't identify yourself. In Israel, first of all, we have the language, the Hebrew. Secondly, you know our condition. We send our sons and daughters to the army, and Judaism is everywhere, even though when you can't identify yourself, people out of Israel identify you, especially, you know, our enemies. And here is another story. I heard a lot of Israeli people that either move to the States or sometimes come for some years. They find themselves going to synagogue, to shul, here in the States and in Israel not. And it's really a huge question, why?
We'll talk more about that, okay? And again, I said there's so much I want to talk to you about all at once, but I first need to know a little bit about you, okay? So first of all, in terms of your own background, you're a Sabra.
Mm-hmm. I was born in Israel.
Where?
I was born in Netanya.
Okay, so you're born in Netanya. And what kind of Jewish home do you grow up in, Aliza?
Oh, you ask the $1 million question. Actually, you know, my grandmother, she was my model in life. And she came from Afghanistan 100 years ago as a Zionist, welfare lady that really, she was Talmida Chachama, she knew everything with a huge faith. And suddenly she found herself a widow, lost 3 kids, but didn't give up of her faith. And I grew up she was like our matriarch mother. And I grew up with her, with our family. And, you know, she knew how to hug everybody.
Hug everybody.
Hug everybody. She didn't ask, what are you doing in Shabbos, or why you know, do this, or that. And I think that in our days we forgot how to hug everybody. And this was my home. And this, actually what I'm trying to do, to hug everybody. I found myself in the Israeli society 5 days and a half a Israeli, and 1 day and a half a Jewish. And I speak Hebrew and I speak Judaism, and I, all my life, walking on the border.
Oh, that's so interesting, Aliza. The distinction between being Israeli and Jewish. We who live in America, there's a tendency for us, first of all, to romanticize everything. People, that's human nature. One romanticizes. So there's a tendency to romanticize the Israeli scene. And what you're saying is, and I want you to develop the idea for me a little bit, that even within Israel, there's a struggle to find one's Jewish identity, isn't there?
Yeah, because, you remember our history, and when people came to Israel, especially after the Holocaust, and also before, when they run away from the diaspora and want to build a new Israeli, the Sabre, without roots, because we want to forget from the Jewish people that were cry all the time and can't, take care of themselves. We want to build a new Israeli. But it can't exist without roots. And actually, there is a big revolution in Israel, if you want to hear my opinion.
Please.
Especially in the young generation. They are not agree to be any more handicapped in their culture and want to learn more and more about Judaism, about, the books of tools of Judaism. And, I heard the youngest that come back from Auschwitz, and for the first time in their life, in the ceremony, they need to open a Siddur and say Kaddish, and suddenly they realize that they don't know where is the Kaddish in the Siddur. And they come back home and say to their parents, come on, how come that we don't know what is Siddur, what is Kaddish, and where and why the person that grew up in New York know, even though that there is not religious, So I'm not talking about Chazara B'Tshuvah, about become religious. I'm talking about our roots, our tools, our Judaism, our identity. We can't, raise a generation without all this knowledge. Otherwise, one day people... Why to be a Jew? Why to stay in Israel? Why not to be, in the global world in our days? And I think the young generation really want to touch the Judaism in its tools.
You speak about how in your heritage there was a great deal of learning, that in essence you're the inheritor of people who learned. To what extent, though, Aliza, as you were growing up as a young Israeli girl and then young woman, to what extent were you exposed to real Jewish learning?
I learned what I learned, and then in the age around 30, I understood that many books or the fields were closed for me.
Yes.
And I didn't like it. And also I'm involved in activism, especially in women's rights and things like that. And I found out that no rabbis or spiritual leaders, male, are helping us, my friends and me, my colleagues. And always I tell my kids and my students, when you can't find answers and you can't find, when you have problems with your faith, with your, question of life, go learn. Go learn from the history. It can't be that someone else didn't ask the same questions. And that's what I did. When I understand and realize that something is not correct. And I saw my grandmother. She was Talmidah Chachama, as I told you before. She knew a lot.
What about your mother?
And my mother, this is another story, because my other grandmother, they came from Bucharest. And actually, my grandmother from Bucharest, unfortunately, I can say that the Holocaust brought her to Israel. And till her death, she didn't like Israel. She all the time thought about what she had in Bucharest. My grandmother was a model in the 20s, and she has her own fashion show and a shop. And she convinced to come to Israel. She wasn't a Zionist. And between these two, my grandmothers, I grew up all together. And as I told you, my life model was the grandmother from Afghanistan, because I can't forget, she walked to the synagogue every day, 3 times a day, in the Bukhari neighborhood in Jerusalem. And many people, came to her and asked her questions. So always I ask myself, who taught her? My grandmother didn't know how to write and how to read, but she knew everything, all the prayers and the faith and all the Jewish code. So always I ask myself, who gave her the information?
Did you ever find out?
Yes, I mean, her father actually.
Her father.
And it's a typical answer when we speak about women that got the knowledge and the ability to write and to answer and to learn. I think that her father recognized her ability to learn, and he allowed her actually to join to the boys. It was a table, and there it was the oven, because everybody was it was no light, and he allowed her to sit under the table and hear the lessons.
Interesting.
And that's how she became, so knowledgeable.
Okay. I don't mean to keep pressing you, but I understand your grandmother from Bucharest. I don't yet understand you.
Okay.
Okay. You had a mother and a father.
Yes, I had a mother and a father.
Did they want you to have Jewish learning?
Yes, of course.
They did?
Yes.
So what was your Jewish learning?
I'm a Bnei Akiva girl that went to Bnei Akiva movement, Jewish Orthodox high school, and I raised as an Orthodox.
Okay.
And
do you consider yourself to continue to live now an Orthodox life?
Yeah, modern feminist Orthodox.
Okay, okay. That places you for us. Very, very good. Okay. Incidentally, you teach at Bar Ilan, which also has, we understand, it is within the overall Orthodox movement and philosophy, but it's certainly modern Orthodox, correct?
Yes, modern Orthodox.
And so my instinct is the kind of teaching you do, and again, we should point out, you're in the political science department, correct? You're not in the religion department, you're not in the Judaism department.
No. Actually, gender and communication, Israeli society, yeah, this is my field.
Okay, and again, just so our audience knows, you've told me off camera, describe what you do on your own television program. You have your own television program on Channel 10, a prestigious channel in Israel. What is the content of your program?
Jewish and Israeli culture, spiritual, books, a lot of writers, what is going on in Israel.
Okay, and everybody wants to be on your show.
Yes.
Yes, I know. I read I read in the jacket cover of the book, I read the PR material, so I know what prompted you to begin working on editing this book. But I have questions about it. First, though, I want you to tell the story. What was it? What was the incident that you experienced which made you say, wait a minute, I want to edit this extraordinary, loving book, a compilation of prayers which might touch the soul of women? Tell me the story.
I didn't know that prayers will be the answer. But as I told you before, I knew deeply in my heart that I have to do something that will speak to the Israeli people and to the Jewish people.
But there was an event, yes?
Yes, it was an event. And suddenly I found myself reading an article with Chen Kainan. Chen Kainan lost her baby daughter and her mother in terror attack in Petach Tikva, in Canaan and Moshavot. And suddenly she found herself alone. And
but was she part of a Jewish community at that time?
Yes, she was born in Israel. She lived in Israel, and I mean in the Torah.
Was she in your community, for example?
No, I didn't know her.
Okay.
I just read the interview. Actually, the article with her was a goodbye to the Israeli society. She left Israel, and she decided that she can't stay anymore in Israel, and she left Israel and moved to the States. And actually, I mean, this article was published in Eve of Yom Kippur before 6 years, after 2 weeks when she left Israel. And it was like a letter to the Israeli society. I can't stay here anymore, goodbye. And
how did you react when you read it?
I cry a lot. And when I went to the synagogue in called Nidra, I couldn't pray. The tears in my eyes, I mean, I thought about many other things, and I had a hard conversation with God, and I asked him questions.
What questions?
How come? Why? Why? What did she do? I mean, how? Why? So, question that you ask your creator, intimate questions that, I don't know, I felt all her pain here in my body, and you know, I want to hug her, I want to speak with her, I want to tell her about our mothers that have rights in front of God forever. I want to tell her about my grandmother, about her fate, about, you know, to give her something. And the other day I called the journalist, and she told me, Aliza, Chen doesn't want to be in contact with anyone. Even the email she didn't want to give it to me. And some months later, I found myself in Rome, in a big synagogue there close to the Tiber, the famous synagogue, when the Pope came to Rabbi Toaf and asked for forgiveness. And there, after the Kriyat Torah, the Torah reading in the morning, I heard something, a special mishaberach for women. Mm-hmm. And I didn't know
it existed.
It exists. And why in Rome? Why women in Rome deserve so nice mishaberach, and women in the States not? And women in Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, not. And what is all about? And I didn't know. And I opened the books, couldn't find the answer. So I came back to Bar Ilan University. I have a good friend of mine. He is actually the son of Rabbi Toaf, Professor Toaf. He's from Italy, of course. And I asked him, Professor Toaf, what is going on? And via his answers, I understood that I had something in my hands and a treasure of knowledge. And that's how I become familiar with Jewish prayers, Italian Jewish prayers. And actually, in Italy, women knew Hebrew. And the unique Sidurim, the amazing Sidurim that I found in the 15th century, 16th century, were written in Hebrew. So then I start my journey and my huge trip all over, 3 years, all over the place, many places, old museum, archives, Judaica, private Judaica collectors, and always I telling my friends and students and even my kids, when you have something in your in your soul that you want to do, even though people around you say, oh, what are you doing? It's nonsense, there is no women prayer, leave it alone, do what you need to do, write papers in your field, etc., and nobody finances you. It costs a lot to do research like this. But if you have, your faith in you, what are you doing? Go for it. You'll find good people in the way that help you. And that's what happened to me. And that's what happened to a lot of people, that just start going and continue what you believe, people will come and help you. And that's what happened.
In all of your journey, as you found in various countries, prayers that were written with such, again, sweetness and sensitivity, did it ever answer the question that prompted you to begin your journey? The journey began after this woman who lost a mother and a child said, I just had it, I'm leaving Israel. And it troubled you, you cried for her. On your journey, did you ever find an answer that made you feel better?
The answer is that I'm part of something. I'm part of a all big plan. I'm not Aliza alone. I'm part of the Jewish people, and there is something in the end. And sometimes during your life, there is no answer for everything. And if you feel and understand that you are part of something and you are not alone in the world, and you can take the experience and the knowledge from our old mothers and try to give it to our daughters and our sons, and try to, as I told you before, to hug everybody. And something in the end will happen. I know you can call it a geula,
redemption of some
kind. You can call it a new day, you can call it tikkun olam, but something will happen, I know it for sure. And women have the knowledge to make it and to bring it faster.
Do women have this better than men?
Yes.
Why?
For sure.
Why?
בזכות נשים צדקניות בני ישראל נגאלו ממצרים, ובזכות נשים צדקניות עתידים להיגאל. In the past and in the future. Why?
Yes, tell me why.
Why?
Why would you say that women have it more than men?
First of all, now it's the women's turn.
Why isn't it human?
Why
isn't it not in, you know, the whole, at one point we lived in a world in which it was suggested that men were in some way, I'll use a horrible word, superior to women. And our Torah says that when God created human beings in the image of God, he created male and female. And that both male and female, men and women, are created in the image of God. It is un-Jewish to suggest that women are less than men. But I don't understand why it would be Jewish to say that somehow women could do this better than men. I want human beings to find the sensitivity that you're speaking about, regardless of their sexuality. So why would you say to me that you think women can do this better than men?
First of all, I'm not saying, I'm not the only one that say it. בזכות נשים צדקניות בני ישראל
I don't care. I
נגאלו
want to know
ממצרים.
what you say, Aliza.
I'm telling you that we forgot what it means to be a Jewish. We think about the halacha, the Jewish code, and not about the sensitive of Judaism.
Women do that also. Women do that and men do that. And there are some men who understand what halacha is as a direction, and that Torah is a much bigger word than halacha. And there are women who understand it. My only point for pushing you is, what you, and I'll tell you something else about the book. When I'm touched by your book, but I read
many other men like you and secular men like you.
Absolutely.
What I want to tell
you.
you.
But wait a minute, I want to finish the point. I'm touched by your book. I don't find it a woman's book.
Thank you.
And not only that, the vast majority of prayers in this book, women's prayers in your book, and you have a footnote below every single one of them, the vast majority are written by men.
No, not the vast majority.
Yes, the vast majority.
No. First of all,
the vast majority are written by men.
Two things. Why we can't find these prayers in the Siddur? Tell me, who added the Siddur? And who decide which prayer to put in the Siddur and which prayers take out of the Siddur?
I will say
One
this.
question.
I will say this. I'll answer the question for you.
Second question, this is a political work, of
Yeah,
course.
absolutely.
It's a political work.
Absolutely.
Because it shows that in the last times and last periods, rabbis and spiritual leaders were aware of the women's needs. And I can't unfortunately say it in our generation. See the Agunot problem, see other problems that I have to deal as a woman, as a woman and without any help from the spiritual leaders or the rabbis. Why is that? Why rabbis 100, 200, 300 years ago knew to solve problem? For example, the Agunot. There were not Agunot in that number like it's now.
And we should explain what an Aguna is, by the way. An Aguna is a woman who, for one reason or another, is in a marriage and can't get out of the marriage. Either because the husband has just disappeared without giving the woman a divorce, or perhaps he's even died without proof of death, and the woman is bound in that marriage for life. She can never get out of that marriage according to traditional Judaism. And what you're saying is this is one of the most serious problems affecting Jewish women within the traditional Jewish community, the problem of the Aguna. And what you're saying is you don't feel there are, at the moment, modern Jewish leaders, most of whom are men, who are addressing the issue of the Aguna.
Yeah, and if we go together to the books from 16th century, 17th century, you see much more how I say it, creative ways that rabbis found out. Even in Morocco in the 16th century, one of the rabbis went to the Qadi, the Muslim rabbi, and solved together the problems of Agunot. So there are many tools to deal with the halakha. But nowadays people are afraid, their positions, and they do this or that. What I'm telling you now, that I want to combine together the shul and the bet midrash, together the sensitive and the Jewish code. And because of our history and because of the reforms movement, because the Orthodox movement became closed and afraid. And from in the beginning, people thought, what is Aliza is doing? And in Israel, some of the rabbis thought that, oh, come on, don't buy the book. It's a revolution, etc., etc. And it took time, after 3-4 months, that people, especially the rabbis, understood what is going on. Some of them told me that this book is Avodah Zarah.
Really?
Really.
That's terrible.
Yes.
It's a
yes. In the beginning, very famous.
Avodah Zarah, by the way, is
very famous rabbi.
Avodah Zarah is idolatry. You're telling me that there are rabbis who said to you this was Avodah Zarah?
Rabbi, and he also is professor. He invited me to his own university, college, extreme religious college. And he invited me. I didn't ask to come. In front of the students there, he told me, maybe this book is Avodah Zarah, so why many people, especially secular people, buy this book? What is going on? Why they don't buy the Siddur and buy this book?
This is a wonderful book.
Yes, it took him time to understand. After 2 months, he called me and said, I'm sorry.
Okay, but I just want to read some of the names of the prayers, because again, since it's not a Siddur, people may not have a sense of what this is. But this is, some of the things that are in here is a bat mitzvah prayer. We have Deborah's song, a young girl's prayer, a prayer to find a worthy match, prayer for the wedding day, a bride's prayer on her wedding day, a prayer for a childless couple, a prayer for a childless woman. These are prayers that come, you didn't write these prayers, these are all prayers that were written, and your point is they're never included in a traditional Siddur.
And nobody translated
and
Hebrew.
Most Jewish women don't even know they exist.
Yeah.
That's your point.
Yeah.
Okay. And I love this book.
Thank you.
My question for you was a philosophical question of, number one, I am struck by, we should count together how many of the prayers were written by men.
Okay.
I believe you'll be surprised, because I was surprised.
I know the book. I know the book.
Okay.
But
many prayers for women were written by sensitive men.
Of course, men that understood the needs of women, and they understand that there is no prayers for women in the regular Siddur.
And Aliza, there are many prayers that you've included in this book which are gender neutral.
Yeah.
In other words, if you did not tell me I was reading a Jewish woman's prayer book, it could be as much of a prayer that I would say than a woman would say.
But that's what happened in Israel, and also here in the States. See what's happened with the prayer. They came back home. People, say the prayers in private ceremonies, in events, and the prayers came back. A lot of top musicians put music to these prayers and sing them in DVD and everybody. And also names. Donna Grazia, Fanny Noida, Frecha Bat Rabbi Avram. She was a Moroccan lady from the 1735 that she wrote amazing piyutim and prayers in Hebrew, Kabbalah Hebrew. 17th century, 1750, how come that she knew? I need a professor of Kabbalah to explain me what is going on, and who gave her the knowledge. And yes, so if I found a Frecha like this, maybe there were another women like her, but we don't know. We don't know. And yeah, I want to bring back the prayers. I want to bring back the name of the women and to say them thank you, because there are women knew and understood the situation there and tried to write prayers, especially for women. And if you ask my opinion, for example, Fanny Noida grew up in Europe, and she wrote in the 1855 a prayer book for women, first time in German. Mm-hmm. And because she realized that women around her, daughter around her, don't know Yiddish and don't know Hebrew, and they forget that they are Jewish. And she wrote for them a unique book. They allowed to go to the university, to the opera, to learn French, but they forgot that they are Jewish. So she wrote an amazing book, but nobody, even one sentence about her. And after 150 years, I found this book and translated it to Hebrew, and now in English.
Mm-hmm. We began the sort of digression here only because I said to you that I don't know why you, having done this book, including so many prayers written by men, including so many prayers that could be recited by men in your book, as well as by women, And to me, the power of your book for me is that although it recognizes the contribution Jewish women have made to the spiritual side, the poetic side of the Jewish life that has brought you and me to here today, that while that's what your book does, your book is more than a woman's book.
Yeah, it's much more than a woman's book.
And that, therefore, I wanted to say to you, I wonder if I can convince Aliza Lavie that it's not about women. That it's not that women are smarter or more sensitive or would make a better world, but that there are lovely human beings, some of whom are women and some of whom are men, and we need more lovely human beings. And it shouldn't be, the Jewish tradition is wrong to separate, but a woman would be wrong, just as wrong, to separate women from men. I don't want the separation.
It's not a separation, but sometimes you have to understand, even feminism, I mean, we are equal, but we are not the same. We have another different, there are a lot of differences between us. So first of all, think about equalness, and then about needs. My needs sometimes is different from you, and you have another needs that I don't have them.
I agree.
And in our days, even in the feminism theory, you know, in the beginning we start here, and now we understand that we are here. And also with our, you know, history, with our Judaism. What I want to show, and I think you put it in nice words, that rabbis were aware for women needs that days, and in our days, unfortunately, I can't say it. So learn from the history also.
I want to sort of wrap this up by asking you how you would, if you had a chance to rewrite the opening of the Avot, to add the emote, what would your text be? Elohei who? Elohei what? I have my answer. I want your answer. I want to see if you and I would answer it the same way. Let's say we're going to add.
Rivka, Rachel, Leah.
So would you do Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzchak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei?
Sometimes I'll start with women, with our mothers.
Okay.
Sometimes
Can I tell you what I would do?
Father.
Can I tell you why I think it's a mistake? Mm-hmm. And then you tell me if it makes any sense to you. And you don't have to agree with me. I believe it should be the following, and I don't care whether women or men first. I don't think there's a reason for men to come first, but that may be because I'm a man. But it should be the following: Elohei Avraham b'Sarah, Elohei Yitzchak v'Rivka, Elohei Yaakov v'Rachel v'Leah. It shouldn't be men and then women, or women and then men. It should be generation. It's a generational idea, and the men and the women walk together, yachad.
Oh, nice.
That's what I want, and that's why I fell in love with your book. By the way, I don't normally do books. I don't know. You know, you said to me, people are always saying to you, "Please, Aliza, can I be on your show because I wrote a book?" I don't normally do books. I wanted to do your book.
Thank you.
I was so touched by your book.
Thank you very much.
And I'll say it again, it's sweet, it's lovely, it's human. It goes way beyond women. I understand politically why it says it's a Jewish woman's prayer book. It's more than a Jewish woman's prayer book. That's the contribution you've done. You made me feel more Jewish.
Thank you.
Through the prayers in this book that could be recited by men or women. And I was touched, I really was touched by the prayers which were just for women. There's some prayers here which is not about men. It comes out of the life of being a woman. And I said, oh, you know, why didn't I see this before? This is so lovely. But as often as I read a prayer, I said to myself, I wish my daughter would see that prayer.
Thank you,
I
Mark.
also saw prayers that I said, I wish my son saw that prayer. I wish that prayer were something that were part of the Jewish experience of men and women trying to become more
friendly.
Yes, sensitive. I loved your word hug. More hugging.
Like my grandmother.
Like your grandmother.
And to share with you another secret,
yes.
I have only one son, and last year he had his bar mitzvah. And I felt that I wanted to say something, so I, for my first time, wrote a prayer, a mother prayer. And after, he finished the Kriyat Torah, so we opened the Mechitza, and I prayed the prayer, and everybody was crying. Very nice prayer, and many people now adapt this prayer, and actually it will be my next book.
What was the prayer?
Mother pray for her son, and if you ask me, what I mentioned the fathers, the mothers, and then the mothers and the fathers, and also I spoke about the generation, about I asked God that I will be sensitive enough to give him the knowledge and the ability to be a Jewish and to love everybody around himself, although the otherness, the differences, the Jewish people, non-Jewish people, and to be a good human being.
You have an extraordinary neshama. You have a beautiful, beautiful soul. I am really privileged to have met you.
Thank you.
I hope this is only the first time.
Come to Israel to my show.
Well, unfortunately,
in Hebrew. Can you do it?
I can't.
I'll help you like you helped me.
Your English was spectacular.
Oh, thank you very much.
I wish you kol tuv v'hatzlacha, not only with the book, with everything in your life. You're a lovely human being. And you've made a major contribution to what Jewish life is, not only in Israel, but throughout the world. And you have made a contribution that's touched the Christian community, the Muslim community. Really, kol hakavod. It's just wonderful, and it's an honor that you would spend time with me. Thank you, darling.
Thank you very much.
Very much.
Thanks.
And those were the thoughts of Dr. Aliza Lavie. I hope you enjoyed meeting this remarkable woman, editor of A Jewish Woman's Prayer Book, published by Spiegel and Grau. Of course, as always, I invite you to be in touch with me with any thoughts or comments you might have to our discussion. Please email me or write me this week. And so until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. Be well, my friends.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who can send a tax-deductible contribution of $18 or more to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media to help support our programming. Tax-deductible checks may be made out to GEM and mailed to Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. Please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD, and we thank you for your kind support.